Sometimes the smallest things unravel everything. In a quiet town where secrets are buried deep and families cling to their past like lifelines, one bark, sharp out of place, changed everything. A K-9 officer, trained for precision, reacted to a photo hanging innocently on the wall of an old farmhouse. What was hidden behind it didn't just expose a crime. It shattered decades of silence. If stories like this keep you up at night, you might want to hit like and subscribe. Only if you're into real tension, broken people, and the kind of truth that can't be forgotten. The night the dog barked, the farmhouse smelled like wood smoke and lemon cleaner. It was early fall, the kind that comes with warm days but nights that cut through jackets. The kind of weather that makes you feel watched, even when no one's around. Officer Nate Corwin stepped inside the old Remington place with his K-9 partner, a Belgian Malinois named Juno, padding close behind. Juno was calm, focused, disciplined. She didn't bark unless told to, or unless something was seriously wrong. The Remington property had sat empty for years after old Martha Remington passed. Now her granddaughter, Emily, had returned to settle the estate. She'd called in a disturbance report earlier that evening. A broken cellar window, no signs of forced entry upstairs, but something felt off. Nate had expected to find a raccoon or maybe a stray looking for warmth. He wasn't expecting Juno to freeze at the edge of the living room and let out a low, guttural bark at a photo hanging crookedly on the wall. It was an old black and white. A family of 5, 2 kids, a father in a sheriff's uniform, and Martha herself younger, her smile too tight to be real. Emily stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "That's my dad," she said. Her voice was tight. "And my uncle's." This was before everything went to hell. Juno barked again, louder this time, teeth bared. Nate walked up to the photo, heart thudding for no logical reason. He reached behind it, fingers brushing the wall. "Hello." The panel behind the photo felt different. Slightly raised. He pressed it and it clicked. Emily flinched. What the hell was that? Nate pulled the photo off the wall. The wood beneath it gave way with a groan, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a box. A small wooden box, sealed shut with rusted metal latches. Nate looked at Emily. "You ever seen this before?" She shook her head, pale now. "That photo's been there since before I was born. I didn't even know the wall could open." Juno growled. "Whoa. Continuous." Nate undid the latches. The box creaked open. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Old Polaroids, yellowed with age. Each one showed a child. Different faces, different backgrounds. Oh boys. None of them looked older than 10. And not a single one of them was smiling. Emily backed away. "What is this?" Nate didn't answer. He was flipping through them now, hand trembling. At the bottom of the pile there was a VHS tape, labeled in black marker. "For sheriff only." His gut twisted. "I'm taking this in. You shouldn't stay here tonight." Emily nodded, silent. Her eyes never left the box. The precinct in Mason Hollow wasn't much. 2 jail cells, a dispatch desk, and a bullpen where the ceiling fan never worked. Nate set the box on the evidence table and slid the tape into the old VHS player in the back room. Started with static. Then came the sound. A child's voice, whispering something too soft to hear. Then came a room, dimly lit, just a bare bulb swaying above a cot. A boy sat there, eyes wide, breathing hard. A man's voice off camera said, "You know what to do." The boy shook his head. "Please. I wanna go home." Nate hit stop. His palms were sweating. He'd seen ugly things in his 10 years, but this was something else. Something deeper. Something that made your spine crawl because it wasn't just a crime. It was deliberate, rehearsed. And the voice. Something about it gnawed at his memory. He called Chief Mallory. Woke the man up. "I need you down here. And bring Deputy Flores too. We've got something big." Mallory groaned over the phone. "You better not be crying wolf again, Corwin." "I'm not. And you'll see why." An hour later, Mallory stood with his arms folded, eyes locked on the paused image of the boy on the screen. "This is from the Remington house?" he asked. Nate nodded. "Behind a family photo. There's more in the box. Dozens of kids. I don't recognize them, but someone might." Deputy Flores flipped through the Polaroids, her face blank but her hands shaking. "Some of these kids look local." Mallory's face turned hard. "I want this sealed. Don't mention this to anyone until we know more. Not a word, you hear me?" "Why?" Nate asked. "This could be." Mallory turned to him sharply. "Because if what I'm thinking is right, we're standing in something deep. And if we start poking without gloves, we're gonna find out real fast how many people want it kept buried." Flores blinked. "You think someone in the department?" "I think," Mallory said, quieter now, "that the Remingtons had more secrets than we ever knew. And this tape, this box, it didn't end with Martha." He looked at Nate. "You said that photo showed a man in uniform." "Yeah. Sheriff's badge. Early 80s, maybe." Mallory cursed under his breath. "That'd be Henry Remington. He was sheriff before I came here. Retired after a stroke. Lived up by Widow's Ridge." "You think he's still alive?" "I think," Mallory said, "we better find out before someone else does." Emily hadn't gone far. She was staying in town at the Willow Inn. Nate found her the next morning in the garden out back, smoking a cigarette with shaking fingers. He told her what they found. Most of it. Not the tape. Not yet. "My grandfather," she said softly. "He was strict. My dad used to say he kept the house like a prison. But this..." She looked at the box again, wrapped in a black bag now. "I need to know what happened," she said. "Whatever it is. Even if it ruins everything I thought I knew." Nate believed her. But something about the way she said it made him pause. Like a crack in the mask. "You sure you didn't know anything about this wall? The hidden space?" Emily smiled. But there was no humor in it. "I lived in that house until I was 16. And I ran like hell the first chance I got." She met his eyes. "That place was always hiding something." Nate's phone buzzed. It was Flores. One of the boys in the Polaroids had been identified. Missing since 1984. Case closed as a runaway. The boy's name: Ethan Mallory. Chief Mallory's younger brother. The road to Widow's Ridge was barely a road at all. Just a narrow, crumbling path curling up through the hills like a bad memory. Pines loomed on either side, crowding the fading daylight, casting long shadows across Nate's windshield as he drove. Juno sat in the back seat, eyes fixed out the window, ears twitching. She hadn't made a sound since they left town. Nate's thoughts kept circling back to the photograph, that one bark that changed everything, to the tape, and to the name Ethan Mallory. The chief hadn't said much after Flores told him. Just stared at the photo of his little brother for a long minute, then muttered, "I'll be damned." Nate had expected more. A reaction. Anger maybe. Or grief. But the chief had just looked old. And then he told Nate to follow the trail, alone. No backup. No radio chatter. You say anything out loud, this town'll shut like a vault. Now, an hour later, Nate was climbing toward a man who'd vanished from public view 2 decades ago, carrying a box full of buried ghosts. Henry Remington's house stood like a wound in the trees. Half-rotted porch. Shutters dangling. A rusted sheriff's cruiser from the 70s sat flat-tired in the weeds out front. Nate parked on the gravel. He didn't even knock. The door creaked open at the lightest touch. "Sheriff Remington," he called. Silence. Then, "Back here." The voice was dry, reedy. Like leaves rustling over old bones. Nate stepped through the kitchen, past furniture draped in yellowed sheets. The smell of mildew and something darker, old decay, filled the air. In the back room, a man sat in a recliner by the window, oxygen tubes in his nose, hands folded on a wool blanket. Henry Remington. His eyes were glassy but sharp. He didn't look surprised to see Nate. "You're Corwin," he said. "Mallory's kid. Not by blood. But you carry that same stupid weight." Nate didn't sit. You know why I'm here. You found the box. A chill ran down Nate's back. How long's it been hidden there? Remington coughed, wheezing laughter. Since '89. Figured it'd take longer. Those kids. Don't pretend you came for justice. You came because the dog barked. Nate bristled. You knew those children were missing. You were sheriff. I was the law, Remington hissed. I did what had to be done. What nobody else had the guts to do. You kept evidence of abuse. Of torture. That tape. Those tapes were protection. Insurance. From who? Remington's gaze cut to the window. You think this started with me? He motioned toward a drawer near the bed. Top drawer. Folder marked, Inheritance. Go ahead. Nate opened it. Inside were clippings. Yellowed articles. Names. 4 generations of Remington men. All in law enforcement. All stationed in small towns across the county. Missing kids. Rumors. Cold cases buried. And one name circled in red. Tommy Alder. Who's that? Nate asked. Remington didn't answer right away. His eyes had gone distant. He was the first. Before me. Before my daddy. Tommy was different. He liked the attention. Like making them scream. I was 12 when I found out. And by then it was too late. Nate's voice was hoarse. You're telling me this. This thing's been passed down. It was never about hurting kids, Remington said, lying even to himself. It was about control. Making sure the right people stayed scared. You put a leash on fear. You own the whole damn town. Nate stepped closer. You're sick. Remington wheezed. You want the truth. It's not in that box. It's buried out back. Under the wellstone. What is? But the old man just closed his eyes. You're too late, Corwin. The damage was done long before you got here. And then he was gone. The last Remington exhaled one final time. And the room fell silent. Juno whined behind him. The backyard was a wasteland of overgrowth and broken fences. Nate found the old well easily. A moss-covered circle of crumbling stones at the edge of the woods. He stared at it for a moment, heart thudding, before grabbing the shovel from the shed. The soil gave way in heavy, reluctant chunks. Roots clawed at his feet. Sweat poured down his back despite the cold. 6 feet down, the shovel hit wood. Nate cleared the earth until he saw it fully. A child's coffin. Faded with time. He pried it open. Inside was a skeleton wrapped in a decayed sheriff's jacket. Pinned to it was a note. This is what happens when you disobey the order. Tommy Alder. The name echoed in Nate's skull like a siren. At the station that night, Nate pored over the files again. The name Tommy Alder wasn't anywhere in the official databases. But the local yearbooks told a different story. Mason Hollow High. Tommy Alder. Voted most likely to protect and serve. Next to him in the photo, Henry Remington. And a third boy, Franklin Mallory. Nate froze. The chief. The 3 of them had started as rookies together. But Alder disappeared in the late 70s. No record of employment. No death certificate. Was gone. Which begged the question. Why had the box ended up in the Remington house? And why had the chief let it stay buried for 30 years? Nate drove to Chief Mallory's house just after midnight. He didn't call. Didn't knock. Just let himself in. Mallory sat at the kitchen table, a drink in one hand. His badge lying on the counter. I figured you'd come, he said. You were in on it, Nate said quietly. Mallory didn't answer. You knew about Alder. You knew about the kids. Hell, your own brother. Mallory slammed the glass down, shattering it. Don't you dare. You think I didn't try. Think I didn't beg my father to do something. Your father. Franklin Mallory wasn't just my dad. He was the one who started the damn tradition. Nate went cold. I found out when I was 16, Mallory continued. Found Ethan's bike behind the shed. Blood on the seat. My father told me he'd been chosen. Said it was his turn. I wanted to kill him. But I was a coward. So I left. Enlisted. And when I came back, they were gone. The records, the kids, the evidence. All buried. All protected. So you just let it go? Nate asked. I thought it ended when Franklin died. Thought Henry kept the box out of fear, not guilt. And maybe I wanted to believe the nightmare was over. But it wasn't. Mallory nodded slowly. Not until Juno barked. Outside, wind rustled through the empty streets. The kind of wind that carries voices, memories, regrets. Nate stood on the steps of the station, watching the sunrise cut across the pines. He didn't know who else had been part of it, or how far it went. But he knew this. Started with one bark. And it would end with one final truth. The tape kept playing in Nate's head. The boy's trembling voice, the way he flinched at something off camera, and that sentence scrawled in marker. For sheriff only. Nate hadn't slept. Not really. He'd lain on the office cot with his boots still on, one hand resting near Juno's harness, the other on his badge. At sunrise he sat up, rubbed his face, and stared at the box again. He hadn't shown Emily the tape. He still didn't know if he should. But she deserved more than fragments. She deserved answers. Emily sat across from him in the old diner just outside town. Her coffee untouched. The sun poured through the fogged windows, pooling like gold around her. But she looked pale and washed out, like she hadn't slept either. So it was my grandfather, she said. Nate hesitated. Your grandfather had the box, yes. But I don't think he started it. And I don't think he was alone. She glanced at the folded manila envelope Nate had brought. And you think I'm ready to see what's in there? You said you wanted the truth. I said I wanted answers. She smiled faintly. Not nightmares. He slid the envelope to her. There's more. Something we found buried behind the Remington house. Coffin. Child. A warning. And a name. Her hands stopped moving. Whose name? Tommy Alder. That meant nothing to her. He could see it in her face. But the name Mallory did. You're saying the chief. Nate nodded. His father, Franklin Mallory, was part of it. Maybe the start of it. She rubbed her temple. Jesus. What is this, a cult? Not quite. More like an old order. Something passed down under the guise of protection. Or law. Or something worse. She opened the envelope slowly. Her fingers shook as she flipped through the Polaroids. She lingered on one. A boy, maybe 8, sitting on a metal stool with his arms crossed tight across his chest. I think I've seen this boy before, she whispered. Or someone who looked like him. Back when I was a kid. There was a volunteer at church. I only saw him once or twice. He gave me candy even though I didn't ask. Looked just like this. Nate sat forward. You remember his name? She shook her head. But I remember the scar on his neck. Like a burn right here. She touched just below her left jaw. Nate's blood ran cold. One of the Polaroids, the one the chief had stared at longest, had a faint white mark on the neck. He opened the station's archives when they got back. Looked up missing child reports. There it was. 1985. Tyler Mays. Years old. Last seen at a fall festival in Silver Bend, 30 miles from Mason Hollow. Status. Presumed runaway. Case closed. Except Tyler Mays never ran. He was taken. And he may still be alive. The next lead came from the church. Nate and Emily drove out to St. Martin's, a red brick building nestled between cornfields and woods that seemed to stretch forever. The priest there, Father Kellen, had been around since the early 90s and had a memory sharp enough to rival any database. He greeted them with wary eyes. We don't usually see officers unless there's a funeral or a confession. We're not here for either, Nate said. Emily pulled the photo of the boy with the scar from her bag and laid it on the table. Do you recognize him? Kellen frowned. That looks like one of the Remington boys. Maybe a cousin. But, no wait. His brow furrowed. We had a volunteer in the 90s. He wasn't from around here. Quiet. Kept to himself. Didn't stay long. His name wasn't Remington. Tyler Mays. Nate asked. The priest snapped his fingers. That was it. Tyler. But older. 20 maybe. Said he was looking for work. I let him stay in the rectory for a week. Then one day he just vanished. Didn't even take the paycheck I left him. Did he mention where he was staying before that? Kellen paused. He said something about an old camp in the woods. Out past Widow's Ridge. Camp Ashvale. Emily stiffened. My father used to talk about that place. Said it burned down when he was a kid. Nate nodded slowly. Then why would someone be living there 20 years later? They found Camp Ashvale buried in a tangle of pine and bramble. The drive took them an hour on rough roads that barely qualified as terrain. The camp was a ruin, charred cabins, a half-collapsed mess hall, and a moldy sign dangling sideways. Welcome to Camp Ashvale. It's 1952. Juno stepped carefully through the ashes, nose low to the ground. Her body went rigid at the edge of one cabin. She barked once. Nate and Emily ran to her. A trapdoor, hidden beneath a pile of rotting leaves and broken wood, sat slightly ajar. Nate pulled it open. Below was a narrow staircase, spiraling down into the dark. The air that rose up was damp and stale, tinged with mildew and something else. Something metallic. Blood. Nate clicked on his flashlight. They descended. The basement stretched longer than it should have. Walls lined with stone and wood. Makeshift shelves. Old tools. A lantern still half full of kerosene. And then they saw it. Carved into the walls. Hundreds of them. In uneven, desperate handwriting. Jonah. Ethan. Tyler. Remington. Old Caldwell. Sarah. Oliver. Boys and girls. All children. Some names were scratched out violently. Others were followed by dates. Emily stood frozen. They were kept down here. Nate's light scanned across the far wall. One final message carved deeper than the rest. We're still here. Below it something else. A recent carving. Different handwriting. Tyler Mays, Nate said. He's been here. Recently. They found another box buried under the floorboards. But this one was newer. Loctite. They pried it open. Inside, a folder of documents. Birth certificates. Handwritten notes. A journal. And a photograph. Of a girl. Years old. Blonde hair. Missing front teeth. Labeled. Emily Remington, age 8. Emily stared at it. What the hell is this doing here? Nate opened the journal. The entries were disjointed, written in childish handwriting at first, then slowly more lucid over time. She was meant to be next. The last gift. But someone changed the plan. She doesn't remember. She was too young. Emily backed away. No, that's not possible. I was never taken. She dropped to the floor, knees hitting the dirt hard. Emily! Her eyes were wide, unfocused. I remember a basement. I remember being cold. I thought it was a dream. My mom told me I fell out of a tree and hit my head. But it wasn't a dream. Was it? Nate didn't speak. Because in that moment, she didn't need a detective. She needed someone to believe her. Back at the station, Nate placed the newest box beside the old one. He was building something now. Chain of truth. But the links were old. Rusted. Hidden in places people had long since stopped looking. And someone somewhere had worked very hard to keep them buried. Too hard. Flores knocked on the door. Chief's gone, she said. Disappeared sometime last night. Nate stood. Did he take anything? Only his badge. And the second tape. 'Cause there was more than one. Juno barked once from the hallway. Something was coming. And this time it wouldn't be quiet. The storm came in just after midnight. Heavy rain lashed against the station's old windows as Nate sat alone in the evidence room, the two boxes side by side like coffins waiting to be opened. The lights flickered. Somewhere behind him, Juno let out a low, uneasy whine. The second tape was gone, taken sometime between midnight and sunrise. Only 3 people had access to the evidence locker: Nate, Flores, and Chief Mallory. And the chief had vanished without a trace. No note, no call. Just a silent withdrawal into the shadows he'd once sworn to guard. The rain hadn't let up by morning, but Nate and Emily drove anyway. They followed a tip from Flores. A surveillance photo from the gas station just outside Cedar Bluff, 30 minutes west. Mallory was on it, grizzled, hooded, carrying a canvas duffel and a gas can. "Why take the tape?" Emily asked as they pulled onto the highway. "Because whatever's on it," Nate said, "was never meant to be seen." The road curved steeply as they climbed into Cedar Bluff's upper woods, past boarded-up summer cabins and skeletal trees. Emily's fingers tapped nervously on the dashboard. "You think he's going to destroy it?" Nate shook his head. "He could have burned it already. But he's holding it, waiting. Which means he wants someone to see it. Us. Or someone higher. Someone still protecting the names on that wall." The idea of a network, still active, still hidden, gnawed at the edges of Nate's thoughts. What if the tape didn't just show abuse? What if it showed who allowed it? Who covered it up? Who filmed it? They found Mallory's cruiser half buried in mud behind an abandoned ranger outpost. The place looked untouched for years, the windows broken, ivy crawling up the sides, roof sagging like tired shoulders. Nate approached with Juno close, his flashlight sweeping the interior. Blood. On the front seat. Not much, just a smear. But fresh. Emily stood at the edge of the clearing, arms wrapped around herself. Nate kicked open the outpost door. The room inside was cold, dust coating everything like a second skin. But in the center of the room was a table. And on it, a VCR. Still warm. The second tape sat beside it. No label. Just a black rectangle of dread. A sheet of paper lay folded beneath it. Nate opened it. Mallory's handwriting. "If you're reading this, I couldn't do it. You want the truth. It's on this tape. But know this, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And they will come for you." Emily didn't speak as Nate slid the tape into the player. The screen crackled, then faded in. A different room this time, larger, cleaner, like a medical facility or training hall. Fluorescent lights. A wide mirror. A child sat at a metal table, arms shackled. A voice behind the camera said, "Let's begin." Another voice, familiar, added, "He's the last one. We'll start fresh after this." Nate's stomach turned. The second voice belonged to Franklin Mallory. The boy on screen cried softly. Then the door opened, and someone stepped in. Henry Remington. But younger. Hands gloved. He sat across from the child, and began asking questions. Routine ones. "Where do you live? What's your name? Do you remember what happened yesterday?" Each answer was documented, time-stamped. This wasn't torture. It was a system. A script. Process. Nate hit pause. His hands were shaking. Emily was pale as ash. "This isn't about one town," she whispered. "It never was." "No," Nate stood. "It's bigger. Structured. Coordinated." Juno barked once. From outside. Someone was coming. 2 black SUVs pulled into the clearing, headlights off, moving slow. Nate grabbed the tape, shoved it into his coat. "Out back," he hissed. "Now." They slipped out the rear window just as the front door splintered open. Men poured in, dark suits, no badges. One of them whispered into a radio. They weren't police. Not even close. They ran into the woods. Rain pounding through the trees. Juno leading, ears pinned back, darting like a shadow through the brush. Emily stumbled, falling hard on a tree root, mud streaking her coat. Nate pulled her up. "They're tracking us," she gasped. "Then we make it hard." He led them toward an old hunting trail, doubled back twice, and slid them into a dry creek. They waited, breathing hard. Juno stayed silent, crouched low beside them. Footsteps crunched above. A voice spoke. They had the tape. Another voice. Doesn't matter. We have what we need. They moved on. Nate and Emily didn't move for 15 more minutes. Then, slowly, they climbed out. They made it back to Mason Hollow just before dawn, cutting through back roads and forest trails. Nate had the tape. And a decision to make. Show it to the press. Risk losing control of the narrative. Take it to the state police. Risk it being buried again. Or something else. He called Flores. Meet me at the station. I've got something you need to see. Her voice crackled. You okay? No. But I think I'm finally doing something that is. By noon, Flores had seen the tape. And she didn't speak for a full minute after. Then, we need to go wide. National. You can't sit on this. I don't think we're the only ones who've seen it, Nate said. They're playing a bigger game. And I think we're just the bait. Emily sat in the corner, watching both of them. You still think this ends with one arrest? One expose? She said. This thing goes back generations. It's in the walls. The schools. The churches. The families. Flores turned to Nate. Then we bring the whole house down. And what if it buries us with it? Flores narrowed her eyes. Then we make damn sure it's worth it. Juno barked twice. Outside, a black sedan pulled into the lot. This time it wasn't faceless men. It was someone Nate recognized. Agent Marie Keene. BI. 3 years ago, she'd investigated child trafficking in the north. Found 3 judges on the take and 2 sheriffs dead under accidental circumstances. She stepped out, trench coat soaked, eyes sharp. I heard there's a tape, she said. Nate didn't answer. She held up a badge. This stays between us. But if you want this to stop, really stop, you hand it over now. Before you become next week's headline. Emily looked at Nate. Can we trust her? He thought for a long second. Then handed her the tape. That night, Nate stood alone in the Remington house. The photo on the wall was gone. The secret panel open. He traced the edge of the compartment. Behind the wood there was something else. A name carved into the studs. Remington. And below it, remember what you forgot. The wind moaned through the eaves. And somewhere deep in the bones of the house, the truth whispered back. Not finished. Not yet. The old house breathed at night. Wood creaked under invisible weight, and the walls whispered like they'd memorized every sin ever spoken inside them. Nate stood in the narrow hallway outside Emily's childhood room, staring at the gouged name in the beams behind the hidden panel. Remington. Remember what you forgot. It wasn't just a message. It was a trigger. Emily sat in the living room, knees drawn up under an old quilt. Her eyes fixed on the same family photo that had started everything. Now unframed, it rested on the coffee table between them. That handwriting, she said quietly. It's mine. Nate turned. You're sure? She nodded. The way the R loops into the E. I remember writing that when I was little. In notebooks. On my dollhouse. I carved my name on a tree once in the backyard. I used to write it just like that. You think you wrote the message behind the wall? I don't remember doing it. But maybe I did. Pause. Nate, I think I was down there. In that basement. Maybe only for a night. Maybe longer. I don't know. But something was done to make me forget. Drugs. Or fear. She looked back at the photo. Her grandfather. Her father. Her 2 uncles. All in that frozen, joyless portrait. There was a door in the cellar I never opened, she whispered. They told me it was where the rats lived. Said it was sealed for a reason. Nate felt his stomach drop. Show me. The cellar stairs groaned under their weight. Nate led with his flashlight, Juno close behind. The air was stale, heavy with mold and old secrets. The far wall of the cellar was lined with shelves, most empty, some still holding rusted jars and broken tools. And behind the 3rd shelf, a door. Barely visible through the wood slats. Emily touched the edge. My father said never to touch this shelf. I thought it was because of the mess. I didn't know it hid this. Together they pulled the shelving aside. The door was old, thick, iron-banded and cold to the touch. No handle. Just a single word scratched into the surface. Again. Nate turned to Emily. You sure you want to do this? I've lived my whole life afraid of this house, she said. I'm done being afraid. He nodded and forced the door open. It scraped like teeth over stone. Behind it, a corridor, narrow, dirt-lined, lit only by Nate's flashlight. The far end a chamber. And inside, a single child's bed. A rusted tin lunchbox. A broken doll. And scratched into every wall. Millie, Millie, Millie. Over and over. Nate turned to her. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't blink. I lived here. The lunchbox held nothing but folded papers. Crayon drawings. Shaky handwriting. One page stood out. Stick figures. 4 tall, 1 small. The small one was circled in red. Underneath, in a child's hand. I was the lucky one. Emily clutched it like a lifeline. They chose me, she whispered. But something changed. I think. Someone let me go. Who? She shook her head. I don't know. Back at the station, Flores was pacing. Agent Keene had called. Tape was real. The evidence damning. She'd already begun preliminary steps toward a federal investigation. But there was a problem. We've got leaks, Flores said. 3 of the names on that tape vanished overnight. 1 retired judge, 1 private school headmaster, and Nate already knew. Chief Mallory. Again. Emily sat in the corner, watching the rain gather at the window. She hadn't said a word since they left the cellar. Nate pulled her aside. Whatever's happening, you're in the middle of it. I've always been in the middle, she said. They just made sure I never remembered. They found a USB drive in a sealed envelope at the Remington house the next day, tucked behind the family photos frame. Inside was a series of scanned letters, all handwritten, all signed TM. Tyler Mays. They took my name. They gave me a new one. I lived under their rules, wore their clothes, smiled when they said smile. But I remembered. I always remembered. And I wrote everything down. Emily was supposed to be next. But someone stopped it. A man with shaking hands and a burned uniform. He told me to run. He said to find a way to tell the world. He said she was his daughter too. Emily gasped. Nate froze. What? He asked. My father wasn't in the tapes, she whispered. Not once. Not even mentioned. I thought that meant he was involved. But what if it means he wasn't? What if he tried to stop them? They dug into the files again. Emily's father, Michael Remington, had left the sheriff's office early. Retired at 39. The record said medical. No further details. He died a year later in a car accident. Or so they thought. The autopsy report was missing. And the crash photos. Filed under a sealed, unrelated case. Flores tracked down the mechanic who towed the car. He remembered. Said the brake lines had been cut clean. Murder. Covered up. And now, full circle. He saved Emily. And he paid the price. Nate stood in front of the town's war memorial the next morning. Names carved in stone. Flags fluttering. This town had buried its heroes alongside its monsters. But no one remembered the difference anymore. Emily joined him, standing silent for a long moment. You still want to burn it all down? She asked. I want the truth to hurt, he said. The way it's supposed to. That night Agent Keene returned. The federal task force had been greenlit. Multiple arrests. Subpoenas. A storm coming down the mountain. I'm staying, Nate said. Keene raised an eyebrow. You'll be a target. I already am. Back at the house, Emily found one last letter. Hidden in her father's old jacket. The ink had bled with time, but it was still readable. If you're reading this, it means I failed. But I tried. God, I tried to keep you out of it. Don't trust the badge. Don't trust the robe. Trust the bark. It always knows where the rot is. She folded it and tucked it into her pocket. Then she leaned down and whispered to Juno, "Thank you." The dog rested her head in Emily's lap. And for the first time since this all began, Emily closed her eyes without fear. They came in waves. First, the headlines. Federal Task Force raids Mason Hollow Town Hall in midnight sweep. Child abuse ring tied to local officials. Generational cover-up linked to former sheriffs. Then came the arrest. 3 former county judges. 2 private school deans. A retired senator. Family physician. And finally, under escort and hidden under a blanket, Chief Raymond Mallory, captured in a cabin off Lake Wilder. His arrest wasn't dramatic. No resistance. No words. Just a quiet surrender. Like he knew this had always been the ending. Emily watched it all from the sidelines. She never gave interviews. Refused every podcast, every reporter at her doorstep. Nate asked her once why. "Because they turned my story into theirs for too long," she said. "Now it's mine again." He respected that. Inside the hollow walls of Mason Hollow's oldest houses, silence had replaced whispers. People stopped making eye contact. Church pews emptied. Flags were taken down. The smiles became colder. And yet, something was shifting. A girl from the middle school showed up at the station one day with a notebook full of drawings. Most of them were dark. All of them told stories. She said her uncle used to take her on camping trips that she doesn't remember, Flora said quietly. The girl had drawn Juno on the cover. "You think she'll talk more?" Nate asked. "She already has," Flora said. That notebook was the first truth she's ever written. Juno became something of a town legend. Kids left her treats at the station door. Elderly women crossed the street to bless her head. And every now and then, she'd sit under the town's old flagpole and just stare at the horizon, ears twitching, as if listening for something only she could hear. The house on Widow's Ridge was torn down. Emily watched from a hill as the machines crushed the last of the roof, the shingles splintering like bone. "I thought I'd feel lighter," she said. "You don't. I feel quieter. Like a room I was locked in for years just ran out of echoes." She looked over at Nate. "You're staying, aren't you?" "Yeah. Even after the press leaves. Especially then." She didn't speak again for a long time. Then she said, "I think I'll sell the bookstore. Go somewhere no one says the word Remington like a ghost. You'll come back." "I don't know. But I'll send postcards." He smiled. "I'll train Juno to read." Agent Keene visited one last time before transferring the case to a federal oversight team. She handed Nate a folder. "Unclassified this morning. You were right about Tommy Alder. He didn't just disappear. He was relocated. Under federal protection. Then he broke rank." "Why?" "He didn't agree with the program anymore." "The program?" Keene hesitated. Then said, "It was sanctioned." Nate felt like the floor shifted under him. Not all of it. Not the torture. But some of the reconditioning methods. They were developed with military input. Psychological compliance. Deconstruction. That tape you found wasn't just abuse. It was training. For what? Keene met his eyes. Obedience. And the children. They were disposable. Collateral. Nate leaned back. So it wasn't just a small-town cover-up. She gave a sad smile. It never is. The second tape was locked away again. Not buried this time, archived. Logged. Filed with evidence. Its contents copied across encrypted drives. And the bark Juno gave that day, at a dusty photo of a family smiling too perfectly, echoed through every courtroom from here to D.C. It reminded people that rot doesn't always smell like decay. Sometimes it smells like lemon polish. Like clean uniforms. Like church candles. 3 months later, Nate sat on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the first snow roll in. The town was quieter now. Some of the older folks had left. Some stayed and just didn't talk anymore. Flores ran the station most days. Nate took fewer calls, spent more time walking with Juno through the trails. He started a new folder. Labeled it unfinished. Because the work wasn't done. Probably never would be. Emily's postcard came in winter. A watercolor print of a lighthouse. On the back, in her sharp handwriting. Nick. I still remember the cellar. Not every second, but enough. Enough to never go back there in my mind unless I'm ready. But I remember the bark. Juno's. The sound that told me something was wrong when no one else did. The thing that made the memories crack just enough for light to come in. Tell her thank you. For both of us. Still healing. E. Later that night, Nate walked to the station. Snow fell steady. He passed the town square, the flagpole, the old fountain. Stopped at the war memorial again. This time someone had added a plaque. Mul. Ras. Tucked beneath the names. It read. Asterisk in memory of the children who never came home. And to the one who barked loud enough to wake the dead, asterisk. He knelt beside Juno and placed his hand on her back. She leaned into him. Didn't bark. Didn't need to. The house was gone. But the truth had finally moved in. And it wasn't going anywhere.